In my 32 years as a forensic investigator for the Portland Police Bureau, I learned that the most dangerous crime scenes aren't always the ones marked with yellow tape and blood spatter. Sometimes they're suburban homes with manicured lawns and Christmas lights. And sometimes the most urgent calls don't come through dispatch. They come at 3 in the morning from a kid whose voice you've known since he was born, shaking with the kind of terror that makes your blood run cold. When my nephew Kieran called me that night in October, I'd been retired for 2 years. But the second I heard him say those words, I knew retirement was over. The call came on a Thursday. I remember because I'd spent Wednesday evening at Powell's Books, buying a stack of mystery novels I'd never have time to read. My wife Diane had passed 4 years earlier, and the silence in our Laurelhurst house had become something I filled with hobbies. Woodworking, reading, the occasional consulting gig when Portland PD needed a second opinion on cold cases. I'd just fallen asleep when my phone lit up with Kieran's name, Uncle Marshall. His voice cracked. Not the casual, "Hey, Uncle Marsh," he'd greeted me with at Labor Day dinner. This was different, raw. "Uncle Marshall, I'm at Legacy Emanuel. I need you. Please. I need you right now." I was already reaching for my pants. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I fell." He said it too quickly. "Down the basement stairs at home. That's what everyone's saying. But Uncle Marshall, I didn't fall. He pushed me. Gregory pushed me, and now he's here telling everyone I tripped over my own feet because I was working late in my studio and I was tired. But that's not what happened. My wrist is broken and there's something wrong with my ribs, and Mom is looking at me like I'm lying, and I swear to God I'm not lying." I was already in my truck. "Which emergency room are you in?" "The main ER, North Pavilion." "Uncle Marshall, please hurry. Gregory keeps talking to the doctors and Mom keeps nodding and I feel like I'm going crazy. Nobody's listening to me." "I'm 10 minutes away, Kieran. I'm coming. Don't sign anything and don't let them discharge you until I get there." He's saying I need to come home. He's saying I probably have a concussion and I'm confused about what happened. "Stay put. I'm coming." I drove through empty Portland streets doing 70 in a 45 zone, past the dark windows of the Pearl District and across the Broadway Bridge. My mind was already working the way it used to work, cataloging facts, building timelines, identifying inconsistencies. Kieran was 23, a freelance graphic designer who lived in my sister Vanessa's basement because Portland rent was obscene and he wanted to save money. He'd converted the basement into a studio apartment and workspace. He was a night owl, often working until 2 or 3 in the morning. He was healthy, coordinated, and careful. I'd watched him rock climb at Smith Rock. I'd seen him navigate hiking trails in the Columbia River Gorge in the dark. The kid didn't just trip downstairs. Gregory Whitfield had married my sister 18 months ago. He was a corporate vice president at a tech firm in Beaverton, drove a Tesla Model S, wore tailored suits, even on weekends, and had opinions about everything from wine to politics that he delivered with the absolute certainty of someone who'd never been wrong in his life. I disliked him from the moment Vanessa brought him to family dinner. Not because he was arrogant. Lots of people are arrogant. Because there was something performed about his kindness, the way he touched Vanessa's shoulder, the way he laughed at jokes. It all looked right, but it felt wrong. Like watching an actor who'd studied the part but didn't understand the character. Vanessa had been alone for 6 years after her husband died from a sudden heart attack. Kieran had been 17 when he lost his father. She'd thrown herself into her work as a civil rights attorney, channeling grief into 60-hour weeks defending the wrongfully accused. She was brilliant in court, fierce and precise. But she'd been lonely. When Gregory appeared at a charity fundraiser, charming and successful and interested, she'd fallen fast. I'd tried to voice my concerns once. She'd smiled and said, "Marshall, you spent 3 decades investigating criminals. Everyone looks suspicious to you." Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just a paranoid old investigator who couldn't turn it off. But I'd noticed things. The way Gregory corrected Kieran's grammar. The way he'd remodeled Vanessa's house without asking her opinion, just presented her with finished plans. The way he'd suggested Kieran should grow up and get a real job instead of playing around with computer art. Little things. Red flags that individually meant nothing but collectively painted a pattern. The ER waiting room at Legacy Emanuel was the usual fluorescent purgatory of plastic chairs and ancient magazines. I went straight to the reception desk, flashed my retired badge more from habit than authority, and said, "Kieran Brennan." He called me. "I'm his uncle." The nurse checked her computer. "Room 7. But you should know his mother and stepfather are already with him." "Perfect." I walked through the double doors before she could stop me. Room 7 was at the end of the hall, curtain half drawn. I could hear Gregory's voice before I saw him, that smooth baritone he used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "I understand you're upset, but you need to calm down. The doctors need accurate information." I pulled the curtain aside. Kieran was sitting on the exam table, his left wrist in a splint, his face pale and tight with pain. His dark hair was disheveled, and there was a bruise blooming along his left cheekbone. Vanessa stood next to him, her expression caught between concern and frustration. Gregory was by the door, arms crossed, wearing a North Face jacket over pajamas like he'd thrown on the first clothes he could find. He looked annoyed. "Uncle Marshall." Kieran's relief was immediate and overwhelming. "Thank God." "Hey, kid." I moved to the exam table, keeping my voice steady. "Tell me what happened." "Marshall." Vanessa's tone was sharp. "This isn't a police investigation. I'm retired, remember? I'm just an uncle checking on his nephew." I looked at Kieran. "Talk to me." Kieran glanced at Gregory, then at his mother, then back at me. I was working in my studio. It was around 2:30. I heard Gregory come downstairs. He started yelling about how I was keeping him awake with my keyboard clicking. I said I'd be quieter. He said I was a freeloader, and I needed to learn respect. I told him it was my mom's house, and she said I could live there. He grabbed my arm and started pulling me toward the stairs. I tried to pull away, and he shoved me. Hard. I fell backward down the stairs. My wrist broke when I tried to catch myself. Gregory's laugh was short and incredulous. "That's quite a story, Kieran. Very dramatic. What actually happened is I heard a crash and found you at the bottom of the stairs. You told me you tripped." "I never said that. You were disoriented. You had just hit your head." "Marshall." Vanessa stepped forward. Gregory called 911 immediately. He probably saved Kieran from worse injury by getting him here so quickly. I looked at my sister. Really looked at her. The dark circles under her eyes. The way she was gripping her purse strap. The defensive set of her shoulders. "Where were you when this happened?" "I was asleep. I didn't hear anything until Gregory woke me up and said we needed to go to the hospital." "The basement stairs are carpeted, aren't they?" "Yes." "Why does that matter?" "Because a person falling down carpeted stairs makes a different sound than someone being pushed down them. One is a tumble with thuds at intervals. The other is a single impact followed by the sound of someone trying to catch themselves and failing." I turned to Gregory. "Which sound did you hear?" His jaw tightened. "I don't appreciate your tone. I don't appreciate my nephew sitting here with a broken wrist and a story that doesn't match his injuries." "Marshall, enough." Vanessa's voice had the edge she used in court. Kieran fell. Gregory helped him. "You're turning this into something it isn't." Before I could respond, the curtain moved again, and a doctor stepped in. She was young, maybe 35, with tired eyes and dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She held a tablet and wore the kind of expression I'd seen on medical examiners, the look of someone who'd learned to see past what people said to what the evidence showed. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Dr. Patel. I've reviewed your x-rays and exam. You have a distal radius fracture, commonly called a broken wrist, and 2 cracked ribs on your left side. I'm going to refer you to an orthopedist for the wrist, and the ribs will heal on their own with rest and pain management." She paused, glancing at the room. "I do need to ask you some questions privately. If everyone else could step out for a moment." Gregory moved toward the door. "Of course. We'll be right outside." "Not you," Dr. Patel said quietly. "I need to speak with Mr. Brennan and his uncle, privately." "His mother should be present," Gregory insisted. "No." Dr. Patel's tone was polite but firm. "Hospital policy for patients over 18. I need a few minutes alone with the patient." Vanessa opened her mouth to object, then closed it. She was a lawyer. She knew when to recognize authority. "Fine. We'll wait in the hall." The second they were gone, Dr. Patel turned to Kieran. I'm going to be direct because I don't have time for subtlety at 3 in the morning. Your injuries aren't consistent with a simple fall downstairs. The fracture pattern in your wrist suggests defensive positioning, like you were trying to ward off an impact. The cracked ribs are anterior, meaning something hit you from the front with significant force. There's also bruising on your left upper arm that's shaped like fingers, approximately 2 hours old based on the coloration. She looked at me. You're the uncle? Retired forensic investigator, Portland PD, 32 years. She nodded once, unsurprised. Then, you already know what I'm about to say. These injuries match a pattern I've seen before. Someone grabbed him. There was a physical altercation, and he was pushed with enough force to cause the fall. I'm required by law to report suspected abuse. I'm also required to offer you resources and options. She pulled a card from her pocket and handed it to Kieran. This is the number for a domestic violence advocate. They can help you with safe housing and legal options. Kieran stared at the card. My mom won't believe me. That's not uncommon, Dr. Patel said gently. Family dynamics are complicated, but your safety matters more than keeping peace. You're an adult. You can make your own choices about where you go from here. Can he leave with me? I asked. As soon as I finish the discharge paperwork, I'm prescribing pain medication and referring him to orthopedics. He should not go back to that house tonight. When Dr. Patel left to get the paperwork, Kieran looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the 8-year-old who used to help me build birdhouses in my garage. What do I do, Uncle Marshall? You come home with me. We document everything, and then we figure out what happens next. Mom is going to be so angry. Let me handle your mother. The discharge process took another 20 minutes. Gregory and Vanessa waited in the hall, their conversation stopping abruptly when I emerged. Vanessa's face was set in the expression I recognized from depositions, the one that meant she'd made up her mind and nothing was going to change it. We're taking Kieran home, she said. No, you're not. He's coming with me. Marshall, don't be ridiculous. He needs to rest and recover. His room is at our house. His room is in the basement where his stepfather assaulted him 2 hours ago. He's not going back there. Gregory's face darkened. That's a serious accusation. It's an accurate description of events. It's slander. And if you continue to spread these lies, I'll have no choice but to pursue legal action. I stepped closer to him. Not threatening, just close enough that he had to look up slightly to maintain eye contact. In my years working crime scenes, I'd learned that guilty people have tells. Innocent people get righteously angry. Guilty people calculate. And right then, Gregory Whitfield was calculating whether he could intimidate a 64-year-old retired investigator into backing down. Let me tell you what's going to happen, I said quietly. I'm taking my nephew to my house. Tomorrow, I'm calling a friend who still works in the domestic violence unit. We're going to file a report. And then, I'm going to do what I did for 32 years. Investigate. I'm going to pull medical records. I'm going to talk to neighbors. I'm going to find out if this is the first time you've put your hands on him or if there have been other incidents. And if I find out you've been hurting that kid and hiding it, I will make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. Marshall. Vanessa's voice trembled. Stop. Just stop. Why are you doing this? Why are you trying to destroy my marriage? That hurt more than I expected. I'm trying to protect your son. From what? From a man who loves us? Who's given us stability? Who called an ambulance the second he found Kieran hurt? Her eyes were bright with tears. Do you know what it was like after David died? Do you have any idea how alone I was? Gregory saved me. He brought light back into my life. And now you're standing here trying to paint him as some kind of monster because you've spent so many years looking for criminals that you can't see good people anymore. Vanessa. No. I'm done. Kieran, you're coming home with us right now. No, he's not. Kieran's voice was quiet but steady. He'd appeared in the hallway behind me, one arm cradling his injured wrist, his discharge papers in his other hand. I'm going with Uncle Marshall. Kieran, please. Mom, I love you, but I can't go back there. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. The pain on my sister's face was devastating. You're choosing to believe this? You're choosing to throw away our family? I'm choosing to tell the truth. I'm sorry that hurts you. I'm sorry Gregory wasn't who you thought he was. But I can't lie about this. I can't pretend it didn't happen. Gregory put his hand on Vanessa's shoulder. The gesture looked supportive, but I saw her flinch slightly. Let them go. If Kieran wants to stay with his uncle and invent stories, that's his choice. We know the truth. I wanted to grab him by his expensive jacket and slam him against the wall. Instead, I put my arm around Kieran's shoulders. Let's go, kid. We walked out through the automatic doors into the cold October air. Behind us, I heard Vanessa crying. The drive back to Laurelhurst was silent. Kieran stared out the window, his good hand gripping the door handle like he was afraid he might fall apart if he let go. I wanted to say something comforting, something that would make this better, but I'd investigated enough domestic violence cases to know that comfort was a luxury victims couldn't afford yet. First came safety. Then came documentation. Then came the hard process of rebuilding. My house was dark when we pulled into the driveway. I'd left in such a hurry I hadn't even locked the door. Inside, the living room still smelled like the coffee I'd made 18 hours earlier. Diane's presence was everywhere. In the photos on the mantel and the Afghan draped over the couch and the ceramic bowl she'd made in a pottery class still sitting on the coffee table, filled with keys and loose change. Your room's upstairs, I said. Second door on the left. It's the guest room, but the bed's made, and the bathroom's across the hall. Kieran didn't move toward the stairs. Uncle Marshall, what if Mom's right? What if I'm making this bigger than it is? What if I did trip, and I'm just confused? Look at me. I waited until he met my eyes. I spent 3 decades investigating crimes. I know what defensive wounds look like. I know the difference between accident and assault. Dr. Patel knew it too. You didn't imagine this. You didn't exaggerate this. What happened to you tonight was real, and it wasn't your fault. Then why doesn't Mom believe me? That was the question that had been eating at me since the hospital. Because believing you means accepting that she made a mistake. It means admitting she brought someone dangerous into her home. It means acknowledging that all the stability and happiness she thought Gregory gave her was built on something false. That's a hard thing to face. So what do? You heal. You stay safe. And you let me handle the investigation. You're retired. Retired doesn't mean incompetent. I still have friends at the bureau. And I still know how to build a case. He nodded slowly, then winced as the movement pulled at his ribs. Thank you. For believing me. For coming to get me. That's what uncles do. I showed him to the guest room, made sure he had water and pain medication, and told him to wake me if he needed anything. Then I went to my study, pulled out my old case notebooks, and started making a list. First thing in the morning, I'd call Detective Sarah Vang in the Domestic Violence Unit. We'd worked together for years before I retired. She was thorough, relentless, and didn't tolerate abuse from anyone. Then I'd call my former partner, Tommy Reeves, who now ran background checks for a private investigation firm. If Gregory Whitfield had a history of violence, Tommy would find it. I'd also reach out to the neighbors on Vanessa's street, the casual conversations that might reveal whether anyone had noticed anything unusual. Shouting, sounds of conflict, Kieran, avoiding the house during certain hours. I opened my laptop and started a timeline, the way I used to for cases. 2:30 in the morning. Gregory comes downstairs. Altercation begins. Approximately 2:45. Kieran at bottom of stairs. 3:10. 9. 111 call. 3:40. Arrival at hospital. 4:15. Doctor. Patel's examination reveals inconsistencies. The injuries told a story. The bruises on Kieran's arm matched the pattern of someone gripping hard enough to leave marks. The wrist fracture showed defensive positioning. The cracked ribs meant frontal impact, not the kind of injury you get from tumbling downstairs. These were facts. And facts didn't lie, even when family members did. I worked until the sky outside my study window began to lighten, until the streetlights clicked off and I could hear birds starting their morning songs. Somewhere in Portland, my sister was probably lying awake too, choosing between the truth and the life she'd built. I didn't envy her that choice, but I'd made mine the second Kieran's call came through. At 7 in the morning, I called Sarah Vang. Marshall Brennan, she answered, her voice warm with recognition. "It's been months. How's retirement treating you?" "It was treating me fine until 3 this morning. I need your help with something, and it's complicated because it's family." I heard the shift in her tone, the way she went from friendly to professional. "Tell me." I explained everything: the call, the hospital, the injuries, Dr. Patel's assessment, Gregory's behavior, Vanessa's denial. When I finished, Sarah was quiet for a moment. "You're absolutely certain about the injuries?" Dr. Patel was certain. I trust her judgment. "Okay. Bring Kieran in this morning. We'll do an official interview and photograph the injuries. I'll also request the hospital records and talk to Dr. Patel myself. If the evidence supports what you're telling me, we can pursue this as an assault case." Vanessa won't cooperate. She doesn't have to. Kieran's an adult, and he's the victim. His testimony and the medical evidence are enough to move forward. She paused. "Marshall, you know this is going to get messy, right? Family cases always do." "I know. And you're prepared to lose your relationship with your sister?" That question sat in my chest like a stone. Vanessa and I had been close our whole lives. When our parents died in a car accident 30 years ago, we'd leaned on each other. When her husband died, I'd been the one she called at midnight, when the grief was unbearable. We'd raised our kids together, celebrated holidays, weathered losses. The idea of losing that made me feel physically ill. But I'd also watched Kieran grow up. I'd taught him to fish. I'd helped him with math homework. I'd been there when he won his first design competition, his pride and joy so pure it made my throat tight. I'd promised his father, my brother-in-law, that I'd always look out for him. "I'm prepared to do what's right," I said. "Then bring him in at 9. Kieran was awake when I went upstairs, sitting on the edge of the guest bed, staring at his splinted wrist. He looked young and lost in borrowed pajamas. "How's the pain?" I asked. "Manageable. I took one of the pills." He looked up at me. "Did you sleep?" "Not yet. I've been making calls. We have an appointment with a detective at 9. She's going to take your statement and document your injuries. It's going to be formal and official, and once we start this process, there's no taking it back. Are you ready for that?" He was quiet for a long moment. "What if Mom never forgives me?" "Then that's her choice. But your safety is more important than her feelings." I know that sounds harsh. It is harsh, but it's also true. What about Gregory? What happens to him? If the evidence supports what happened, he'll be charged with assault. It'll be up to the DA to decide whether to prosecute. But either way, there will be a record, a legal documentation that this happened. Kieran nodded slowly. "Okay, let's do it." The interview at the Portland Police Bureau downtown took 2 hours. Sarah Vang was patient and thorough, walking Kieran through every detail of the assault. What Gregory said, how he grabbed Kieran's arm, the sensation of being pushed, the fall, the pain. She photographed the bruises, the splint, the contusions on his ribs. She recorded everything with the kind of meticulous attention that would hold up in court. Afterward, she pulled me aside. "The evidence is strong. I'm going to forward this to the DA's office with a recommendation to charge. It'll take a few days for them to review and decide whether to issue a warrant. What about Vanessa? I'll need to interview her as a witness, but she's not required to cooperate. If she refuses, we move forward without her testimony." Sarah's expression softened. "Marshall, I'm sorry. I know this isn't easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is." We spent the rest of the day at my house. I made scrambled eggs that neither of us had much appetite for. Kieran slept on and off, the pain medication making him drowsy. I sat in my study and made more calls, gathering information, building the case the way I used to. Tommy Reeves came through with background on Gregory Whitfield. No prior arrests, no domestic violence reports, no red flags in his employment history. On paper, he was exactly what he appeared to be: successful, clean, respectable. But Tommy had also found something interesting. Gregory had been married once before, 7 years ago. The marriage lasted 14 months before his wife filed for divorce. The filing cited irreconcilable differences, but Tommy had tracked down the ex-wife's lawyer, who was willing to talk off the record. There had been allegations of controlling behavior, financial manipulation, and one incident of throwing objects during an argument. Nothing that rose to the level of charges, but a pattern that looked familiar. I also talked to 3 of Vanessa's neighbors. Mrs. Chen, who lived 2 doors down, mentioned that she'd heard raised voices from Vanessa's house on multiple occasions over the past 6 months, always late at night. She'd assumed it was television. Mr. Patterson, across the street, said he'd seen Kieran leave the house at odd hours, 2 or 3 in the morning, and walk around the neighborhood like he needed to get away from something. And the Johnsons, next door, said they'd noticed that Kieran rarely came and went during daylight hours anymore, like he was avoiding being in the house when Gregory was home. None of it was conclusive. All of it was suggestive. It painted a picture of a household that wasn't as peaceful as it appeared, of a young man who'd been quietly trying to survive a situation that was becoming increasingly dangerous. On Saturday morning, Vanessa called. "Marshall, we need to talk." Her voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before. I stepped out onto the back porch, closing the door so Kieran wouldn't hear. "Okay, let's talk." "The police called me. They want to interview me about Gregory. They're talking about pressing charges. I need you to make this stop." "I can't do that." "Yes, you can. You can tell Kieran to drop this nonsense. You can tell him to admit he was confused and that nothing happened." "Vanessa, he wasn't confused. The medical evidence is clear. The medical evidence shows he fell downstairs. That's all it shows. The medical evidence shows he was assaulted. There's a difference. You're destroying my life, Marshall. Do you understand that? You're tearing apart my marriage. You're making me choose between my son and my husband. How dare you put me in this position?" The anger in her voice made my chest ache. "I'm not the one who put you in this position. Gregory did that when he put his hands on your son. Gregory didn't touch him. Kieran fell. He's making up stories because he doesn't like Gregory, because he's never accepted that I moved on after his father died. Do you really believe that?" She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice shook. "I have to believe it, because if I don't, if I believe Kieran, then everything I've built for the last 18 months is a lie. My marriage is a lie. The happiness I thought I found is a lie. And I can't survive that, Marshall. I can't go back to being that broken, lonely woman I was before Gregory. I won't. So you're choosing Gregory over your son. I'm choosing to trust my husband. I'm choosing to believe in the life we're building together. And I'm telling you, as your sister, as someone who's loved you our entire lives, that if you continue this crusade, you'll lose me. Permanently. Then I guess I'm going to lose you." She hung up. I stood on the porch for a long time, watching the October wind strip leaves from the maple tree in my backyard. Diane used to sit out here with me on Sunday mornings, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, her feet tucked under my leg for warmth. She would have known what to say to Vanessa. She would have found the words that could bridge this gap. But Diane was gone, and I was just a retired investigator who knew how to build cases but not how to rebuild broken families. The following Tuesday, Gregory Whitfield was charged with 4th-degree assault. The DA's office issued a warrant, and he was arrested at his office in Beaverton. He posted bail within 2 hours, hired a prominent defense attorney, and immediately filed a restraining order against Kieran, claiming harassment and defamation. Vanessa called me one more time. "I hope you're satisfied. You've ruined everything." Then she blocked my number. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and sleepless nights. Kieran stayed in my guest room, which slowly transformed into his room. His laptop appeared on the desk. His clothes filled the closet. His design work covered the walls. He saw an orthopedist who casted his wrist properly and predicted full recovery in 6 weeks. He started therapy with a counselor who specialized in domestic violence trauma. He began to heal, physically, if not emotionally. The case moved forward despite Vanessa's refusal to cooperate. Dr. Patel's medical documentation was damning. Sarah Vang's investigation uncovered the pattern of Gregory's controlling behavior. The ex-wife came forward with her own testimony, describing incidents that paralleled what happened to Kieran. The DA built a solid case. In January, Gregory Whitfield accepted a plea deal. He pled no contest to 4th-degree assault, received a suspended sentence, was mandated to complete anger management and domestic violence intervention programs, and was issued a no-contact order prohibiting him from being within 100 feet of Kieran. In exchange, he avoided jail time and maintained his corporate position. Vanessa filed for divorce 3 weeks later. I found out from Tommy Reeves, who'd kept tabs on the court filings. She'd cited irreconcilable differences, the same vague language Gregory's first wife had used. She didn't call me. She didn't reach out to Kieran. She simply moved forward with the legal dissolution of her second marriage, quietly and privately, the way people do when they're trying to preserve whatever dignity they have left. Kieran took the news in silence. We were in my study when I told him, surrounded by the case files, I'd finally started to box up and put away. He stared at the wall for a long moment, his now healed wrist resting on the arm of the chair. "Do you think she'll ever talk to me again?" he asked. "I don't know, kid. I hope so. Do you think she believes me now?" "I think she's processing what happened. Sometimes it takes people a long time to admit they were wrong, especially about something this big. But the fact that she left him says something. It says she finally chose me over him." "Yeah, it does. I wish it hadn't taken this long." "Me too." Spring came slowly to Portland that year. The cherry blossoms bloomed late, and the rain seemed to last forever. Kieran found an apartment in the Hawthorne district, a small studio with good light where he could set up a proper workspace. He was taking on more freelance clients, building a portfolio, talking about maybe starting his own design firm. He seemed lighter, like something that had been crushing him had finally lifted. I helped him move in on a Saturday in April. We carried boxes up 3 flights of stairs, assembled furniture from IKEA, hung his artwork on the walls. It felt like a beginning, like the start of something new and hopeful. As I was leaving, he hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Uncle Marshall, for believing me, for not giving up, for everything. That's what family does. I know Mom's not talking to you either. I know you lost her because of me. I didn't lose her because of you. I lost her because she wasn't ready to face the truth. That's not your fault. Do you think we'll ever all be together again, like we used to be?" I thought about Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas mornings and all the family gatherings that would never be the same. I don't know. Maybe. Someday. But even if we don't, you're going to be okay. You're stronger than you think. On a Tuesday in May, I was in my backyard working on a birdhouse when I heard the doorbell ring. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most of my days were quiet now, filled with hobbies and the occasional lunch with retired colleagues and long phone calls with Kieran, where we talked about everything and nothing. When I opened the door, Vanessa was standing on my porch. She looked older, tired. Her hair was shorter than it had been the last time I saw her, and there were new lines around her eyes. She wore jeans and a sweater, casual in a way that felt deliberate, like she'd specifically chosen to look approachable. "Hi, Marshall." "Vanessa." We stood there in awkward silence, the weight of 6 months and 1,000 unsaid things hanging between us. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked into the living room and stood in the middle of it, looking at Diane's photos on the mantel, the Afghan on the couch, the coffee table that hadn't changed since the last time she'd been here. "The house looks good?" "It looks the same." "Yeah, I guess it does." She turned to face me. I came to apologize. Of all the things I'd expected her to say, that wasn't one of them. "Okay, I was wrong. About Gregory. About Kieran. About everything." Her voice cracked. I was so desperate to not be alone anymore that I ignored every warning sign. I told myself that Kieran was just being difficult, that you were just being paranoid, that everything was fine because I needed it to be fine. And in doing that, I put my son in danger. I chose a man who hurt him over believing him when he asked for help. "Vanessa, let me finish. Please." She wiped at her eyes. After Gregory was charged, I convinced myself everyone was wrong. I stood by him because I couldn't admit I'd made such a catastrophic mistake. But then I started noticing things. The way he'd talk to me when he was angry. The way he controlled where I went and who I saw. The way he made me feel like I was crazy for questioning him. And I realized that what he did to Kieran, he'd been doing to me too, just in different ways. Psychological instead of physical. But still abuse. "I'm glad you got out. It shouldn't have taken this long." It shouldn't have required you and Kieran to go through hell to make me see what was right in front of me. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry, Marshall. I'm sorry I didn't believe Kieran. I'm sorry I chose Gregory over my own son. I'm sorry I said those things to you. You were trying to protect us, and I called you paranoid and told you I never wanted to see you again. I was wrong. About everything. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her it was okay, that I understood, that family was complicated and people made mistakes. But another part of me, the part that had spent months watching Kieran struggle with trauma and rejection, wasn't ready to let her off the hook that easily. Does Kieran know you're here? I asked. No. I wanted to talk to you first, to apologize to you first, because I owe you that. She twisted her hands together. I want to try to make things right with him. I know it'll take time. I know he might not forgive me, but I want to try. I want him to know that I believe him now, that I'm sorry I didn't believe him then, and that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the mother he deserved. He's hurt, Vanessa, really hurt. Not just physically. The fact that you didn't believe him, that you chose Gregory's word over his, that damaged something fundamental. I know, but he's also healing. He's seeing a therapist. He's building a life. He's doing okay. Because you helped him. Because you were there when I wasn't. We stood in my living room, my sister and I, with 6 months of silence between us and the difficult work of rebuilding ahead. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't neat or complete, but it was honest, and maybe that was enough for now. I can't promise he'll forgive you, I said. That's not my decision to make. I know, but I can give you his phone number, and I can tell him you want to talk. What happens after that is between you and him. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you. I wrote Kieran's number on a piece of paper and handed it to her. She held it like it was something precious and fragile. Marshall, she said as she was leaving, thank you for not giving up on him. Thank you for being the parent I should have been. You're still his parent, Vanessa. You just lost your way for a while, but you found it again. That's what matters. After she left, I called Kieran and told him she'd come by. He was quiet for a long time. What should I do? He asked. Whatever feels right to you. If you want to talk to her, talk to her. If you need more time, take more time. There's no wrong answer here. Are you going to forgive her? I already have. She's my sister. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means acknowledging what happened and choosing to move forward anyway. That's very wise, Uncle Marshall. I've had 64 years to figure it out. He laughed, and the sound made something in my chest unclench. 2 weeks later, Kieran and Vanessa met for coffee at a cafe in Hawthorne. I wasn't there. It wasn't my place to be. But Kieran called me afterward and said they'd talked for 3 hours. They'd cried. They'd been honest. They'd agreed to try to rebuild their relationship slowly, carefully, without expectations or timelines. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't magically healed, but it was a start. In my 32 years as a forensic investigator, I learned that justice doesn't always look the way we think it should. Sometimes it's a conviction and a jail sentence. Sometimes it's just the truth being acknowledged after months of denial. Sometimes it's a mother and son sitting in a coffee shop, choosing to try again. I also learned that the hardest cases aren't always the ones with blood spatter and yellow tape. Sometimes they're the ones that happen in suburban houses with manicured lawns, where the only evidence is bruises and broken trust, and the courage it takes for a kid to call his uncle at 3 a.m. and say, I need help. Kieran's wrist healed completely. The cast came off in February, and by March he had full mobility back. The ribs took longer, but eventually the pain faded. The emotional wounds would take years, maybe a lifetime, but he was working on them. He was trying. That's all any of us can do. As for me, retirement turned out to be more interesting than I'd expected. Kieran and I had dinner every Sunday. Vanessa and I talked on the phone once a week, slowly rebuilding what we'd lost. I took up woodworking again, built a new bookshelf for my study, and adopted a dog named Scout, who kept me company on long walks through Laurelhurst Park. And sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in my study and look at the case files I'd built for Kieran, the documentation and evidence and witness statements that had helped save him. I'd think about all the victims I'd helped over 3 decades, all the cases I'd solved, all the justice I'd managed to deliver. But none of those cases mattered as much as this one, because this one was family. This one was personal. This one was about protecting someone I loved. And in the end, that's what mattered most. Not the conviction, or the plea deal, or the legal vindication. Just knowing that when Kieran needed help, when he called me at 3 in the morning with fear in his voice, I'd answered. I'd believed him. I'd fought for him. That's what uncles do. That's what family does. And no amount of time or distance or mistakes can change that fundamental truth. The birdhouse I'd been working on when Vanessa came by stayed unfinished for weeks. Finally, one Saturday afternoon, I brought it out to the garage and started sanding it down. Scout lay at my feet, and through the open garage door, I could see the cherry trees blooming late but brilliantly, their pink blossoms finally catching up to spring. My phone buzzed with a text from Kieran. Landed a big client today. Corporate rebrand. Want to celebrate? Dinner's on me. I smiled and texted back. Proud of you, kid. Pick the place. Life goes on. Cases close. Wounds heal. And families, however broken, find ways to come back together, one careful conversation at a time.